Hello, it's Adil bringing you a review of the FTSE 100 from an intermarket analysis perspective. Okay, so where exactly are we and where do we find ourselves? Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, so basically from a fundamental perspective, first of all, let's just have a look. Okay, so from a fundamental perspective, first of all, okay, the sterling is certainly into support. Okay, now if we bring up a chart of GBP USD, you'll see this. Okay, so sterling is certainly into support. GBP CHF is into support with a bullish engulfing candle. GBP JPY putting a bottoming tail is into horizontal support. And GBP USD, if I just bring up a chart of that, you can see is a doji candle at horizontal support. So argument number one for the FTSE to move lower is a higher sterling. Given the inverse relationship between the FTSE and sterling, obviously expect sterling to move higher and expect the FTSE to move lower. And this can be seen also with regards to the economic data as well. The economic data last week out of sterling was strong, and also the inflation forecasts were raised, and also the shadow banking shadow committee, I think, for the BOE expected that there was a higher percentage of interest rate rise as opposed to a cut. So everything certainly obviously pointing for sterling to rally. Adding the fact that the US dollar index, as you can see, and the UUP is into horizontal resistance and gap fill resistance. So from the especially with regards to the weak NFP data on Friday, so therefore that paves the way for sterling to certainly amount a recovery. And if that's the case, then we all know what's going to happen to the FTSE 100. Yes, okay. We all know what's going to happen to the FTSE 100. Now, my last video called for the FTSE sell-off. Why? Because of BP. And that's exactly what we got. Okay, BP sold off. As you can see, went into gap fill. Quite a substantial sell-off there. And that's exactly what caused the FTSE 100 to sell off as well. Okay, so FTSE obviously has held the gap, bounced. I then called the bottom in for the day on Twitter. If you look at my Twitter feed, I called the low on the FTSE around the 6830 region, and that's exactly what happened. And the FTSE rallied. So far so good. Last week was a spectacular week with 300 and almost 50 points for the week nailed on the live analysis service. So those of you that are watching this video and want to join the live analysis service, it's very easy. Click on the live analysis service tab on my website, and you'll see information explaining exactly how I operate. There's a short little video there I've compiled to explain to you exactly how I operate and give you an insight into it. You can also read the reviews, etc., that are below, that are left by subscribers. So certainly encourage you to, if you are taking the 1 week trial, to certainly leave a review of the trial and exactly what you thought of the actual live analysis service and how that's helped. There's also a chat room there for you. There's a fundamental analysis service as well. Now, if you do want the 1 week trial, please notify me by clicking on the free trial. There's an email address there that you can email. I need you to be on WhatsApp. I need your text messages if you are. I'll give you a mobile number for WhatsApp messages, and also if you are in the UK, I can send you text messages. Also, I need your email address, etc. So I can add you on for a 1 week trial and see exactly if the live analysis service is for you and if it helps your trading and your understanding of the markets. Okay, so that's basically an insight there. Okay, so yes, the FTSE 100 obviously sold off, quite a substantial sell-off, and obviously due to BP. Now that BP obviously has filled the gap and bounced from gap fill, this is a bear flag formation. So the weakness in BP will continue given the fact that you've got a death cross, and we are looking for a potential move lower. Okay, so that's something that you need to focus on from a trading perspective. Okay, now with regards to the other fundamental variables, the truce that was signed over the week on Friday with regards to Russia-Ukraine has already been violated over the weekend with firing in Donetsk and shelling in Donetsk. Well, not to mention that the sanctions, apparently Russia stated that the sanctions must not go ahead and it will retaliate. So the Europeans have organised sanctions for them to come into effect Monday, and the Russians will retaliate. So what's the point of a ceasefire if there's if there's sanctions on Russians? Okay, so that's obviously not going to bode well. Okay, that's certainly not going to bode well at all. So that's basically where we find ourselves from a fundamental point of view. And not only that, we also have some news regarding plane carrying 100 Americans land in Dubai after being diverted to Iran, etc., etc. So that situation doesn't bode well with Iran and US. There's certainly hostilities there, and also with regards to their nuclear program, there was a report out. On top of that, You look at Russia and Ukraine. Obviously, that's the situation that we find ourselves in. That doesn't bode well. Add in the fact that you've got weaker jobs report out of the US on Friday, and that's caused the US to certainly weaken and fall further, because they were pinning their hopes on a growth recovery based on jobs. Okay, so that doesn't bode well at all for the US markets either. So that's basically where we find ourselves in from that perspective. And mainly the main factor for sterling or FTSE weakness will be sterling. Okay, and given the fact that the FTSE hasn't rallied higher along with Europe is a sign of weakness. The fact that the US markets haven't rallied higher along with Europe is a weakness. And with regards to Europe, Europe remains in a quagmire as well, because Mr. Wiedmann, the German chap from the German central bank, etc., he doesn't agree with the rate cuts or the concept of ABS purchases. Okay, so if Mr. Draghi has fired his bazooka, etc., etc., and yet there's no support, and then and the Germans oppose it, then obviously that will reverse all the gains there. So that certainly remains vulnerable from that perspective. So that's something else that you need to focus on and keep an eye out for next week, especially when you find a CAC, for example, the French CAC obviously into cap-filled resistance, given the fact that Mr. Hollande has been accused of some sort of what was the scandal? He's involved in some sort of scandal at the moment. Trierweiler adds to the pressure on Hollande. Francois Hollande is set for a further knot with the publication of the memoirs of his jilted ex-partner, who portrays the French president as a vain political operator, does not like the poor, etc., etc. So he certainly isn't having a good time, okay, especially when his ex is against him. Anyway, so that's the situation that we find ourselves with regards to the French CAC. The German DAX is certainly roaring ahead, and that's mainly because the economic data out there came out quite spectacular. Okay, so that's something that's certainly worth considering. And obviously we are into fib 75% resistance, so that's something certainly needs to be taken into consideration as well, given the fact that the DAX is into 75% fib now, and also given the fact that if you look at it from an intermarket analysis perspective, the Nasdaq, if you look at the 60-minute chart, has a HNS formation, which doesn't bode well going into next week. Okay, so going back to the FTSE 100 now that I've explained the fundamentals for the FTSE, the FTSE 100 fundamentals. Horizontal chart, obviously bearish engulfing candle, topping tail certainly rejected at 6,900, and as you can see on the weekly chart as well, certainly horizontal resistance. Now if you cross-reference that with our FTSE 250, and you can see here key resistance. Why? Because the 250 is heavily reliant upon exports. Okay, and exports is heavily reliant on sterling, and if sterling is putting in a bottom, then expect this to start reversing earlier. With FTSE 350 again, bearish engulfing candle, horizontal resistance held. Going to our smaller time frames. Okay, smaller time frames. If we bring up the FTSE 100. Okie dokie, FTSE 100. Here we go. FTSE 100, a 60-minute chart. Basically, you're looking at HNS formation. Okay, that's basically what we're looking at, and that coincides with the Nasdaq HNS formation. So therefore, down we go. So you're looking at around the 750 region or lower going into next week. Especially this, expect this 200 MA to be tagged. Okay, that's something that's going to be very, very important for next week's trading. Okay, so watch out for that HNS formation. Down we go. Okay, with regards to the FTSE 100, if you look at a 10-minute chart, we obviously bounced from gap fill, which I call for. In my previous video, I explained this HNS formation was in play, and we're looking for potential market to go around the 6850, if not lower, and obviously going into the gap fill, which exactly where it went basically. Okay, so that's the move that we had there, led by BP. And remember, BP still is in a whole heap of trouble, especially with regards to the fines that it's facing, and certainly it hit its profits, and it's in a bear flag situation right now. So that's the situation, folks, with regards to the FTSE 100. And so risk on, risk off, wax on, wax off. Goodbye now. Just before I do go, actually, not goodbye, one more thing I need to do is give you an insight into the sectors. This is going to be very important. Okay, so retail sector. So if you look at the retail sector, daily chart, bearish engulfing candle, a 60-minute chart, again, is HNS formation, which I've already highlighted. The target needs to be hit, therefore that's bearish for the FTSE 100. Let's have a look at another sector, the banking stocks. Okay, the banking stocks, you can clearly see daily chart, bearish engulfing candle, 60-minute chart, you can see here again H&S formation. So does that mean bullish or bearish for the FTSE? Yes, it means bearish. Okay, so as you can see there, same formation, the retail sector, left shoulder, head, and now right shoulder going in, bang, down we go, and we need to close this gap below. So what does that mean for the FTSE 100? It's bearish. Okay, so that's the banking sector. So if you look at the mining sector, the mining sector is probably the only one that's slightly into support. Okay, but having said that, we basically are just consolidating for a potential move next. It's probably more than likely to be lower. But the mining sector, certainly given the fact that the dollar is into resistance, certainly does looking to catch a bid from that perspective. Okay, let's just have a look here. Okay, let's have a look at the next sector. Okay, so the next sector here now, given the fact that the mining sector has a potential there for support or sideways price action. Oil sector, as we all know, is under immense pressure given the fact that BP is being fined, and certainly bearish consolidation there. 60-minute chart from my perspective certainly indicates potential lower again. We've had quite a sell-off. A bounce obviously was expected, looking for a bear flag and obviously looking to make a potential new low. Okay, so that's certainly something that we'll keep an eye out for with regards to that. Retail sector, like I said, I've discussed. Now we're looking and focusing on the chart of the builders. Okay, builders, basically builders and construction. Okay, so horizontal resistance on the daily chart, 60-minute chart. It certainly looks like it's exhaustion, especially now given the fact that sterling is going to start moving higher, so therefore rate expectations increase. The builders will certainly come under pressure as well. So therefore, that sector will certainly feel the heat. Therefore, the FTSE 100 will also feel the heat as well. Let's just have a look at the pharmaceutical sector now. It's probably the last one that we need to focus on. The farmers. Okay, so let's look at a daily chart. The pharmaceutical sector, not exactly bullish, bearish continuation pattern by the looks of it. And the 60-minute chart again is putting a double top. Once you put in a double top, what's next is a drop, and you're looking for a lower high, higher highs and higher lows are finished, and now you're looking for a potential lower low and lower high and potential test for 200 MA and this gap down here. So overall, all the sectors indicate lower for the FTSE 100, therefore indicate bearish price action in the week ahead. So the sectors are confirming the bearishness on the 60-minute chart of the FTSE, which is H&S, and the daily charts obviously indicating resistance as well. And given the fact that sterling is now into support, that will obviously move FTSE in the opposite direction. Okay, folks, so risk on, risk off, wax on, wax off. This is truly a good buy.